Mary, you can start.
Okay, great. Well, welcome everyone to the Dahdaleh Institute Intern Symposium. My name is Mary Viktorovich, and I'm the Associate Director here at the Dahdaleh Institute for Global Health Research. Today, we will feature 8 exceptional students, showcasing their numerous contributions to global health research, and celebrate their internship journey and progress here at the Dahdaleh Institute. First, and importantly, the land acknowledgement. York University is situated on the traditional territorial area known as Tikaronto, and we acknowledge its current treaty holders, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. We acknowledge this as the traditional territory of many Indigenous nations, including the Anishinaabe Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Huron-Wendat, and the Métis. This territory is subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wamput Belt Covenant, an agreement to peaceably share and care for the Great Lakes region. As this is a virtual event, some participants are on different territories, so please take the time and space to give thanks and gratitude and respect to the land you are currently living and working on. So today's symposium is part of the, basically the capstone to the annual Global Health Internship Program. The program uses an experiential education approach to provide dynamic opportunities for students to work with some of our faculty and fellows in a professional environment to support high caliber research in the areas of our current themes that are global health and humanitarianism, planetary health, and global health foresighting. Today is a showcase of this year's cohort's hard work. Each intern will describe what they did and learned. For example, the major tasks carried out. Their work has contributed towards research addressing critical global health challenges. Our interns have had the opportunity to be directly involved in research projects by providing direct support through data analysis, completing literature reviews, and collaboration and partnership building with workshop planning. We hope these presentations can also inspire other students and faculty to participate in the Institute's program. For prospective interns who are present today, we would like to encourage you to stay connected with the Dahdaleh Institute. You can find new opportunities posted on our website under the internship program page, and also sign up to our newsletter. And Naeem will post that URL into our chat. So just in terms of housekeeping notes, this is a 2-hour event. We'll start with the first 4 presenters, followed by a brief Q&A and discussion session. This will then be followed with a 10-minute break at 1:50 p.m. and then we'll resume at 2 p.m. with the remaining 4 presentations and conclude with another round of Q&A and discussion session before wrapping up at 3 o'clock. This is a reminder also to use the chat or the raise hand button for questions and comments, and please remember to mute your microphone. So for our first presenter, Nilu Nazamezadeh. Please correct me if I need to be corrected, Nilu. So Nilufar is a current honors Bachelor of Science student majoring in psychology and minoring in biology at York University. She joined the Dahdaleh Institute for Global Health Research as a global health intern for the Synergies of Planetary Health Research Initiative and Lab under the supervision of Professor Adil Boran. Nilufar is an aspiring medical practitioner with a goal of specializing in reproductive endocrinology and infertility, and she also wishes to serve as a volunteer medical practitioner in countries where the effects of climate change has significantly reduced the quality of life and access to healthcare has been limited. The title of her presentation is The Climate Health Nexus in Canada. Please go ahead, Nilu. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for the introduction. So I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay, great. So hello, everyone. Thank you all for attending. I'm very excited to be a part of this special event. So today I will be giving a brief overview of the climate and health nexus in Canada, as well as some of the work I've done as a summer intern and a race student under the supervision of Dr. Boran at the Synergies of Planetary Health. Okay, so during the summer, there were two student-driven projects that I simultaneously worked on. One of them being a term project literature review on climate change and health, specifically a scoping review, and the other being an Excalibur perspective piece. So for those of you who may not be too familiar with Excalibur, it's actually the York University community newspaper. Here you can see that I placed the term project literature review in the center because it was the literature review that really gave me the knowledge base to move forward with my other projects and tasks, especially the Excalibur perspective piece. And here you can see that the climate and health nexus is also at the intersection of the two main projects that I worked on. So to further expand on the perspective piece, I was the lead author of an Excalibur OPED project under the supervision of Dr. Boran with the help of the Synergies Lab, as well as a team of co-authors, including Sue, Alex, Ariana, and Jared. I also assisted the international data collection and analysis team with coding nature-based solutions initiatives, such as MCR 2030. And I also assisted with correspondence and support to Dr. Boran, including the COP26 workshop and side event, as well as collaboration with EcoJustice. So throughout our research, I gained insight on the and human health, and how these extreme weather events have exacerbated the health and living conditions of many populations, including Indigenous communities, the elderly, and those with pre-existing medical conditions. I also deepened my understanding on the Canadian healthcare sector climate footprint and how it is actually amongst one of the least green in the world, as it contributes to 4.6% of all greenhouse gas emissions in Canada. And I also learned a little bit about some of the current global and local actions being taken towards a climate safe society. So at a local student level, there are actually many NGOs that are dedicated to climate adaptation and mitigation. And some of them are even based in Canada, such as LEAF, Second Harvest, as well as the Youth Climate Lab. And at the global scale, the Race to Zero campaign and Healthcare Without Harm have partnered up to create a global roadmap for healthcare decarbonization. And of course, some of the personal learnings have been editorial skills for academic writing, conducting a scoping review, as well as professional development, including meeting minutes, email etiquette, as well as sharpening my leadership skills. So here is a diagram by the American Psychiatric Association, which gives an overview of the physical and mental health effects of a changing climate. So for example, extreme weather events such as heat waves, which have been one of the most prominent ones recently, can actually cause heat-related morbidity, as well as anxiety and depression because of the stress and displacement. So as I finish up my Bachelor of Science with the Synergies Lab and work on our future projects. So some of our next steps include the production of the Excalibur OPED, which is actually the final step in publishing, so that's very exciting. I also hope to assist Dr. Boran with CFEL York Knowledge Exchange Dialogue that is taking place this October. And I also hope to work with the lab to do a follow-up report or publication on the Canadian Climate Health Nexus. And some of my personal goals for this year include preparing for the MCAT, applying to medical school, and of course, graduating from York. And now I would like to take the time to give a special thank you to Dr. Boran for her continued support and mentorship. Thank you to the Synergies Lab and the OPED Working Group for making this project possible. So thank you so much to Alex, Sue, Ariana, and Jared. And thank you, of course, to the Dahdaleh Institute, as well as the symposium organizers for preparing this special event. Now I am going to stop sharing. Great, thank you.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Nilüfer. That was really clear and wonderful to learn about what you learned about during your session. Okay, so now we're on to our second presenter, who is Tanaka Dijkstra, supervised by Mathieu Poirier. Tanaka is currently a student in the Global Health program at York University. Prior to her studies in global health, Tanaka obtained a PhD in chemistry from the University of Toronto and Honors Bachelor of Science from McGill University. Sorry for the background noise. She supports research in the global legal epidemiology research stream. The title of her presentation is COVID-19 and Inequality in Latin America and Canadian Cities. So over to you, Tanaka. One sec.
All right. So thanks for that introduction and also for the opportunity to present some of the research that I did over the summer. In global legal epidemiology, I did work on a number of projects, but today I'll focus on COVID-19 and inequity in Latin American and Canadian cities. By now, we're all too familiar with life in a pandemic, but I think as these pictures indicate, experiences have really varied wildly. The pandemic itself has exacerbated a lot of underlying health inequities and inequalities. I think the picture in the middle really sums it up with a sign that says, "Stay home," and there's a nurse walking past the billboard on her way to work. At the same time, large amounts of data have been collected and made publicly available about the pandemic, but really few comprehensive comparative studies have yet to be undertaken. In this project, we focus exclusively on cities as Latin America and Canada are both highly urbanized, with the majority of people living in metropolitan areas. And cities themselves tend to be a microcosm of the society with a variety of socioeconomic statuses, racialized groups, ethnicities, living conditions, and these tend to be stratified geographically at a neighborhood level. So over the summer, we've been building really rich profiles of the COVID burden in the 10 largest cities in the region. So here are some heat maps showing 4 example cities. So Toronto, Santiago, Mexico City, and Rio de Janeiro with their neighborhood distributions of COVID case rates. Much of my time was spent collecting data, and these simple maps already represent many hours of work collecting and cleaning information from national, regional, and municipal data sources. At the same time as collecting the COVID data, we needed to ensure that socioeconomic status indicators, typically average household income or multidimensional poverty indices, were available at the same level of geographic granularity as the COVID information. This involved a lot of Googling to identify important keywords and also the appropriate responsible government agencies. At the same time as this, we discovered that the bureaucracies in a lot of jurisdictions are really quite complex. And this was especially the case in Brazil. But thankfully, over the summer, I learned enough Portuguese so I could wade through huge amounts of health and demographic data for the area. So the next slide here is very preliminary, I'll stress that, analyses of the COVID distributions in those same 4 cities. We calculated concentration indices of COVID case rates as a function of neighborhoods' average household income or multidimensional poverty over time, and these results are shown in black or blue, and the dotted lines are just our confidence intervals. For those of you who aren't familiar with a concentration index, all you need to know is the more positive the number, the more concentrated cases were in richer neighborhoods, and the more negative number, the more concentrated they were in poorer neighborhoods. So knowing that, I think it's somewhat surprising that of these graphs that I show, only Toronto has COVID cases that were primarily concentrated in the poorer neighborhoods. The other ones tend to show this inverse equity a little bit, where at the beginning of the pandemic, the cases were highly concentrated in very wealthy neighborhoods, but that concentration index dropped rapidly. However, they don't all seem to go below 0. They're indicating a sustained concentration in wealthier neighborhoods. And to us, this seemed rather counterintuitive, especially given all the anecdotal evidence that we've seen to the contrary. So we performed the same analysis, and this is in the bottom right here, incorporating testing rates rather than pure incidence rates in the neighborhoods. And indeed, testing was much higher in richer neighborhoods than in poorer neighborhoods for Mexico City, and that perhaps explains the higher positivity or the higher case rates that we are seeing. And when we incorporate case positivity, we do see that concentration index dip below 0, indicating slight concentration in poorer areas. So we're continuing these analyses on other cities as that data becomes available to us. That just brings me to a few future directions for this project. One other study is a quasi-experimental analysis of the effects of lockdowns and school closures on the distribution of COVID cases, and case studies looking at the role of race and ethnicity. So with that, I will wrap up, thanking the Institute and my supervisor, as well as colleagues with whom I worked really closely, and thank you all for listening. I will stop sharing my screen now.
Okay, thank you so much. That was great and fascinating. So now we're on to Christabel Agpour and Yeonju Lee, who both of whom have been assisting me with the scoping review focused on performance accountability and maternal care in sub-Saharan Africa, and helping to develop a manuscript for publication in a peer-reviewed journal. So Christabel is currently pursuing a Bachelor of Science degree in global health at York University. Her specialization in the field of global health is in disease prevention and health promotion, though she also has an interest in global health policy and management. And Yeonju Lee is currently in her, she's basically just completed her final year of majoring in global health with specializing in the policy management and systems stream. She has a special interest in studying women and children's health, as well as improving the quality of healthcare in low-income countries and communities, focusing on the social, economic, and political aspects. And the title of their joint presentation is Performance Accountability in Maternal Care in Sub-Saharan Africa. So over to you, Christabel and Yeonju.
So hello everyone, my name is Christabel and I'm here with my colleague Yeonju to share a few highlights on the scope and review of performance accountability for maternal health care in sub-Saharan Africa, for which our supervisor is Dr. Mary Victorowicz.
So the purpose of this project is to review the current state of knowledge regarding performance accountability mechanisms in maternal health programs in sub-Saharan Africa to enhance the delivery of maternal health care. We focus on mother-to-child transmission diseases such as malaria, tuberculosis, and HIV/AIDS. So far we have been doing lots of article screening using the EndNote software for references, as well as meetings with our supervisor to facilitate work progress, as well as email communication between ourselves and other parties involved in the project. And additionally, we have attended library workshops and literature search procedures. So this is the image of EndNote software that we use to read abstracts and screen articles.
And here on this slide is a preliminary Prisma diagram of our current progress in article screening for maternal health care content with a focus on malaria and tuberculosis. So we started with a collective number of 17,279 articles and have filtered the articles to a number of 487, which are left for further revision.
So Christabel and I have learned the procedures of screening articles for the scoping review using the exclusion and inclusion criteria such as research key terms, strategy processes, and guiding questions that were provided and shared from our supervisor, Dr. Victorowicz. And we have also learned to use the EndNote program to efficiently view and screen articles.
Our future plans involve the continuation of article screening for the Scope and Review project, as well as full text screening of articles meeting inclusion criteria, aiding our supervisor with the creation of a final Prisma flow diagram, as well as reviewing and analyzing content within selected articles for the Scope and Review. And finally, we shall assist with the draft of the Scope and Review manuscript.
Finally, we want to thank our supervisor, Dr. Victorowicz, our librarian, Elo, Naeem, and Teresa for facilitating the Intern Symposium and the Dahdaleh Institute for Global Health Research. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christabel and yeah, and Youngchu. I'm sorry about that. Yeah, it's great to hear that you'll be continuing on in this work. I know there's a huge volume of articles to search, and your persistence is so appreciated in doing that. So we can now move on to the fourth presentation, who is Tiana Putrick, who is supervised by Jenny Phillips. So Tiana is pursuing a disaster and emergency management specialized honors degree. She's interested in disaster ethics, state and human security, and the role of technology in disaster prevention, mitigation, preparedness, and response and recovery, as well digital contact tracing, digital ethics, and the governance of health data in complex human emergencies. So the title of her presentation is Design and Global Health, an Overview. So please go ahead.
Thank you. Just going to share my screen. Okay, so good afternoon, team. Thanks for attending. It's a pleasure to be presenting today. So my name is Tiana Putrick. I'm a third-year disaster management student. And this past summer, I've been working for the Dahdaleh Institute as a disaster and health emergencies research assistant, supporting Dr. James Urbinski's research on design for global health and innovation in global medical education. So a bit of background on these projects. The goal of the Design for Global Health initiative is to identify and solve global health challenges using human-centered design principles and practices and perspectives. This initiative has by far been the most unorthodox yet inspired research initiatives that I've contributed to as an undergraduate student, mainly because rather than relying solely on peer-reviewed literature or grade literature, our work was largely guided by a design monograph, Bruce Mau's monograph, MC24, Principles for Designing Massive Change in Your Life and Work. And this is essentially an artistic design book. So very different than the typical literature I'm used to using. I was tasked with applying Mau's principles of massive change to planetary health, global health and humanitarianism, and global health foresighting. I also classified, categorized, and visualized the Dahdaleh Institute's projects through these design principles, and this project is ongoing. Beyond contributing to the Design and Global Health project, I also researched medical schools to identify curriculum and program innovation. I conducted qualitative and quantitative research on over 50 medical schools across 6 continents, with a particular focus on medical schools that prioritize the Internet of Things, smart city technology, disaster risk reduction, proactive and predictive care, individual and community health, and so on. I also prepared business reports and research reports, delivered weekly presentations, and liaised with key stakeholders in higher education. So during my term at the Dahdaleh Institute, I gained a host of diverse skills. I refined my academic reading and research skills, acquiring more medical expertise, as well as experience in research practices such as using medical headings and tags, journal indexing, and conducting biographical research. I've also honed my concise communication skills. So as a student who is very used to writing 20+ page reports and 70+ page business continuity reports, I am very proud to say that I've mastered the art of the 5-minute presentation and the 3-minute read. So essentially, I can pitch an idea in under 5 minutes and draft a comprehensive report that can be read in less than 3 minutes. I also expanded my lateral thinking skills. I was challenged to supplement logical, analytical, methodical reasoning with artistic intelligence. And that was a great benefit to me because I'm so used to using kind of my analytical system 2 thinking. So I'll be entering my 4th and final year at York University in the Disaster and Emergency Management Specialized Honors Program. And I'm very proud to say I'll be continuing with the Dahdaleh Institute. As for what's next outside of school, I'm currently co-authoring a chapter in a University of Toronto press book titled The Future of Canadian Security. And I'm also proud to share that I am one of 16 Canadian scholars to receive the Killam Fellowship, which is a binational award administered by Fulbright Canada and supported by Global Affairs Canada and the US Department of State. So I will be studying at Wellesley College and MIT, and I'll serve as a student ambassador at government events in Ottawa and Washington, DC. And finally, I'd like to conclude by thanking the Dahdaleh Institute, particularly my supervisor, Dr. James Urbinski, for giving me this opportunity to work and learn alongside this esteemed community of global scholars and change makers. Thank you very much. I really appreciated it.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Tiana. Great to hear about the work you've been so diligently working on. So now we have an opportunity for questions, and yeah, I'll take a look at the chat, but you can also raise your hand. All right, well, let me start with a question, unless I see. Yeah, okay. So let me start it off with a question. So Tanaka, you in your research, the epidemiology, social or legal epidemiology rather, of Latin America, you showed some very interesting graphs, charts, looking at income and the presence of the COVID. Mm-hmm. You know, the disease prevalence, so to speak. Were you surprised by it? Like you talked a little bit that you were surprised, but you know, it seems interesting that effect was most pronounced in our very own city.
Right. Well, I think there are a couple of reasons. We're starting the analysis now, but I think there are a few reasons. One is data quality, where how neighborhoods are defined in Toronto tends to be more organic, where everybody in Toronto, in one neighborhood, is more similar. Whereas in other cities, sometimes the neighborhood has a greater extent. So we're seeing a washing out of the effect a little bit as there's more inequality within a neighborhood. We're not able to capture that result as exactly. But one of the other things, like I showed with the testing data, I think that's where we're really going to see much more of an effect. I didn't show it, but I think we also have done that calculation now for one other city where we do see that tendency to higher test positivity rates in poorer neighborhoods. Yeah, so it's definitely something that we're looking at, and we're also really interested. The data that I showed isn't age standardized, so there's also the possibility that we'll see an effect of that age standardization, as a lot of wealthier neighborhoods also tend to be older, so that might play a role in the increased case counts that we are seeing in wealthier neighborhoods. So once we're able to do that normalization, I think it'll be a little bit clearer what the true results are.
Sorry, on mute there. That sounds fascinating. So, well, good luck with next steps with that analysis. So we have both Carol and Raphael with questions. So Carol, would you please go first?
Thank you so much. I was just typing how impressed I was with all of your incredibly timely presentations, but also your next steps. And I work for Dahdaleh, looking at planetary health operational frameworks, and also with the humanitarian perspective. I work also for Médecins Sans Frontières on climate and environment. My quick question to you is, I mean, with the IPCC report that came out, my son, who's all your age, is like devastated, and you're all working on this. But if any of you would wish to comment, what, you know, your generation has a lot ahead of you and future generations, but for you, what are the biggest actions that you think we need to push for globally? I mean, it could just be a quick commenter in the chat, but I really respect what your generation is doing and facing. And I'd love to hear what you want us all collectively to work on most. Thank you.
Okay. Who would like to go first among the five students who presented? Or, I think, Carol, we could expand out to all of the students, right? I think your question is pretty general.
Indeed, and you answered it all in many ways through your presentation, but, quick thoughts on, and obviously what we need to do is interconnected, right? But, what you think are our immediate next steps, or even what gives you hope. I don't want to take more time, but I really value your impressions and recommendations.
Okay, anyone? Oh, Tiana, I see you've unmuted. Yeah, go ahead.
I put my comment in, but I'll speak it too. Just regarding, if I'm answering your question correctly, with the climate crisis, I think one major step is moving from a linear economy, which is really defined by waste and high consumerism and like fast consumerism, to a circular economy that's more defined by reducing use, reuse of materials, minimalism, and kind of conscientious consumption. So I would say that because so many of our policies and politics are shaped by economy and rhetoric about the economy, I think one of the major ways to actually produce a positive impact on climate is to reshape the way that we think about this major player. So it's very difficult to do, obviously, but I think that would be a good start because it's so ingrained in everything that we do and every way that we think about our society. So
that's a great suggestion, Tiana. I mean, how do we all have to start thinking and acting differently. So I guess what are the first steps to take a more conservationist approach to all of our lives? Anyone else? Let's see if I can see. Any other comments about what is really pressing? Okay, Christabel, would you like to verbally, I see you've written along a note. Would you like to speak up?
Yeah, of course. So what I wrote basically is that there's a lot of inequality in the world, and I believe COVID-19 has really exposed that. So I believe more programs have to address inequality. For example, in the topic of women's health and maternal care around the globe, so there are many issues ranging from lack of access to proper health care to insufficient provision of birth control for family planning programs in underdeveloped countries. So I believe one issue to tackle would be reducing inequality faced by women in particular.
Yeah, that's great. You know, I've once heard that the most powerful thing you can do to improve global health is to educate and support women, because they're the ones who make decisions for their family and their children often. And if they're better educated, they can promote the health of their family. So really important. Yeah. So go ahead. Yes, Raphael.
Great presentations. It's very, very nice to see how diverse sort of the learning curves have been so far. And this is a question that I might also ask in a different way to Ryan, but I would like to first start with Christabel or Yeonju. And I was wondering, given that you guys are doing the lit review or the scoping review on performance accountability. So Christabel partly answered that already, but what I was going to ask is, from what you've done already, from the work that you've done already, have you been able to see any trend in terms of the findings? It could be some sort of specific demographics that's being researched. a region or a performance accountability measure that's being adopted more often than others? Have you guys already been able to think about it? Because I understand there's a huge volume of articles to go through, and sometimes you don't have time to contemplate or to really sort of start thinking about it. But on the top of, like, if you can imagine the first thing that comes to your head, is there anything that caught your attention? To both of you, you can answer.
Okay, I think I can go first. So the first thing that I can remember while going through articles is seeing a consistent recurrence of basically programs that involve community health workers that come into the communities and help educate the women, because by educating them, they're also informing them of things that they need to do in order to access healthcare, as well as to continue receiving healthcare. Otherwise, when it's left up just to the healthcare system, there are some individuals that would be in the community but wouldn't be able to access the healthcare or wouldn't know that they should access the healthcare. And in particular situations, they would instead use traditional methods that aren't always the best case scenario for them. So by educating them in the communities, that was one measure that I saw that was repeatedly being used, as well as being efficient and effective in those communities.
That's interesting. Thank you. Yunju, would you like to add something to that?
Yeah. And the patterns that I found interesting was that, as you guys have noticed, we initially received 17K articles, and then we have narrowed down to around 400 articles. And it shows that there aren't a lot of tools or measurements to measure the performance accountability of maternal health in sub-Saharan Africa. So I guess more resource has to be provided, assisted to measure, so that there can be more research that can be done to enhance the maternal health care. Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah, thank you.
Great. Well, thank you. I see that the chat is very active. Sarah, you had asked a question to Tiana. Would you two like to have that exchange verbally?
I think she actually answered it. I mean, these have been great presentations. I do have a question for all the presenters, actually. So could I ask that, Mary, now?
Yeah, please go ahead.
My background is I've been working in protection, so that's pretty much around human rights, refugee law, and international humanitarian law. And I've been working with the UN for the last 12 years or so. So all the topics that you have presented on today, I just wonder if you were also looking at the whole issue of access to health, the right to health. For example, when you were talking about maternal mortality, or you're talking about climate change and COVID, it just struck me that these could be important considerations in the parameters of your research. Or is that for a later stage or something you may wish to consider in the future? But they were extremely impressive. Yeah, you're all very impressive, and I think it's a great contribution you're going to make in the future. Thank you.
So Christabel or Yonju, would you like to reply, please?
I think I'll go first again, if that's okay with Youngju. In response to that question, the first thing I think about is the Millennium Development Goals 5 in regards to maternal health care, where they had set a target to reduce maternal mortality by 75%, like globally a few years ago. However, that target wasn't accomplished. So that's in relation to the future prospects of this topic regarding maternal health care around the world. So I believe there are more initiatives and implementations that need to be done in various countries in order to help the people that do need help, like especially the communities that are more vulnerable to having more issues within their communities. So I believe that's one aspect that needs to be considered for future initiatives.
I can
agree.
Oh, sorry, go ahead. I thought you were both done.
No, you can add. Oh, sorry.
Okay, sorry about that. I was just going to mention something in the context of COVID in Latin America, where access to healthcare wasn't something that we explicitly incorporated as a metric. However, I think, especially again in the case of Brazil, where there are so many people living in informal urban settlements on the outskirts of the city, where that's kind of baked into the whole problem of these slums as it is. So it is one of the major components of living there is that you don't have access to healthcare. You often don't have access to proper sanitation already in the home. And of course, that is certainly something that we're looking to see if we can tease out the nuances of that while looking at this distribution of COVID cases in these types of cities.
Okay, great. Well, any other questions?
I actually see a question here directed at me. So is it okay if
Okay.
I address
Please.
it verbally?
Please go
Okay.
ahead, Tim.
It's from Nilufar. And to answer your question, Nilufar, the most interesting information I found while researching medical school curriculums actually came from Nepal. And it's a vertical university that is set up across a mountaintop in Nepal. And there are classrooms at each level of the mountain. So at each level, students basically study the climate and the lifestyles of the individuals living at that particular region. Now, what makes it, it's not officially a medical school, but it does have a medical curriculum. And what makes it unique is that it's not taught by PhD professors or MD doctors, but actually by indigenous farmers. And they are teaching about local medical practices that have been culturally passed down through generations and align with the local population's beliefs and practices and knowledge. So I found that very interesting because oftentimes our medical education skips over that. In terms of your second question, I should mention actually another interesting fact about the Nepal school is that anyone can actually take courses here. So it's open to community members, not just students. A farmer could come, a yak herder, they've had yak herders take courses in this. So it was very interesting from that respect, how they have a whole of community approach. It's completely democratized and there's no barriers to education. Regarding your second question, how are Canadian medical school curriculums integrating climate awareness? They are increasingly, but what I found is that there's a general failure to do so. There's actually an initiative called the Planetary Health Report Card, which is assessing medical schools across the UK, Canada, the US, and other countries in Europe in terms of how well they integrate climate awareness into their medical curriculums. And across the board, everyone has received a failing mark. So one hope of that report card is to actually spur and motivate medical schools to realize that this is an issue and to adopt their curriculums. So Oxford Medical School is doing this already. They received, I believe, a C on their report card, and they've already crafted curriculum to be launched in 2022 about climate awareness and planetary health. So far, only one Canadian medical school has elected to participate in the report card, and that's McGill. So I'm hoping that we see it extended across more medical schools in Canada, and with that, more change.
That's really fascinating. Thank you for that, Tiana. So other questions? Okay, well, if there are no other questions for the first 5 presenters, then I suggest we start our break a little earlier and give ourselves 15 minutes and come back and resume at 2 o'clock. So I look forward to seeing you all back at 2 o'clock for our last set of our next set of 4 presenters. Thank you so much and see you soon. Who is Leah Goldschmidt, Leah is completing her Bachelor of Arts in Global Health with specialization in Global Health Policy, Management, and Systems here at York. She's interested in identifying barriers to healthcare and passionate about building appropriate policy and infrastructure to address them. At the Dahdaleh Institute, Leah is assisting in the development and management of the social science and health innovations for tuberculosis. The acronym is SHIFT-B Center with the Dahdaleh Institute faculty member, Dr. Amrita Daftari. And the title of her presentation is Developing and Growing the Social Science and Health Innovation for Tuberculosis Center. Over to you, Leah.
Thank you so much. All right, I'm going to just share my screen. All right. Hi, everyone. So my name's Leah, and I'll be presenting my work that I've done over the summer with Dr. Daftari and Angela. And I'm just I'll be referring to the social science and health innovation for tuberculosis as SHIFT-TB throughout my presentation, as it is a bit of a mouthful. So SHIFT-TB is a relatively new virtual center that was established and launched in March. And so my role was to come on and help them expand their outreach and bring on new voices and new people into the team. So SHIFT-TB is a virtual hub that basically focuses on the social science research and innovation in response to the global TB epidemic. It launched in March, so I've been helping them as they've been growing. SHIFT-TB is quite new, but so far has over 30 members from all around the world, over 20 countries, including low and middle income countries. So during the summer, I focused on 3 major areas: website development, Twitter management, and newsletter creation. So I helped grow the website by uploading various member profiles and uploading content created by SHIFT-TB members. So this could be research reports, anything TB related. And we were able to upload over 200 pieces of content in just the last 4 months. And then I also worked on the Twitter. And so I was responsible for managing it to make sure that I would be regularly active. And it served as another method of publicity, creating ourselves, establishing ourselves within the global health realm. And I was able to increase our following by over 100%. And then I also worked on the newsletter, which I designed using MailChimp, and we were able to send it out to over 100 recipients. And so this featured original content that was written by members and included recent publications, upcoming events, and so on. So what I learned. So first thing I learned, I think, was the importance of utilizing your resources. I think that's something I really recognize a lot, within my work environment, how both my supervisors were very they were very assertive in the fact that they would set up meetings with other organizations in similar areas, use it as an opportunity to share what we learned, and also use it as an opportunity to learn from other organizations what they learned from the beginning, as we are a relatively new organization. And I also learned technical skills. So using WordPress, which is what we use to create SHIFT-TB's website, and using MailChimp, which I use to create the newsletter. And I also learned about the importance of social media within an organization, especially at its beginning, and the importance in using it to help you establish yourself and grow itself. And I think I also recognize the importance social media plays within global health. And I think we're living in the COVID pandemic right now, and obviously it makes sense why that has taken up so much of media and mainstream news. But I think as a global health student, I obviously recognize that we're fighting multiple epidemics at the same time. And my research was focused towards TB. And I think it was really interesting to see within the global health Twitter, the various different epidemics, issues, and other things we're fighting at the same time. And I thought it was really interesting how Twitter has played a role in that. It's created in a way like a global health network where people have been sharing information and research with one another. And so where to next? So I'm really fortunate to be continuing at SHIFT-TB for the upcoming school year, working at in a smaller capacity, but still helping out with the growth and development. And I will also be entering my final year at York University. I'm graduating in spring 2022. I will also be doing an internship or placement in my winter semester, which I'm looking forward to. And after I graduate, I hope to attend graduate school. I'm applying for both master's and law school and trying to figure out where I see myself in terms of like a health, legal, policy realm. Yeah, and just a special thanks to Dr. Daftari and Angela for taking me under their wing and being incredible mentors. And I'm very excited for the upcoming year. Thank you.
Oh, fantastic. Well, thank you, Leah, and sorry for mispronouncing your name. Really fascinating to see, your growth and all that you've learned over the summer. Wonderful. So now we're moving on to presentation number 7. So Ryan Gray, who's supervised by Rafael Aguilar. Ryan is a 4th-year global health student at York University, specializing in global health management systems and policy. He's interested in the bigger picture of global health, such as its governance, leadership, and trade and investment, including research on the global governance of antimicrobial resistance and international relations. So the title of his presentation is Regulating Wildlife Trade to Prevent Zoonotic Spillover. Over to you, Ryan.
Thank you, Dr. Viktorovitz. Let me share my screen. This summer at the Dahdaleh Institute, I had the great opportunity and privilege to be a part of research regarding regulating wildlife trade to prevent zoonotic spillover. This diagram displays the 3 pathways for transmission of SARS-CoV-2. So there's between animals to humans, between humans, and from humans to animals. And so 60 to 75% of these diseases between humans have a zoonotic origin, which means that they come from animals. And wildlife trade in particular increases the human, animal, and environment interface, which is the interactions between humans and animals. And so this is especially where zoonotic diseases may occur and zoonotic pathogens may spill over into humans. So by targeting wildlife trade, it's hoped that we could prevent the spillover of these pathogens and also future pandemics and disease outbreaks. And so more specifically, this is a scoping review on the governance of wildlife trade, regulations, standards, and incentives, especially as the conditions that foster zoonotic spillover. Some findings. This is just of the formally published literature. The gray literature is still to come in the near future. Some themes revolved around the practice of relationships and how actors act and are regulated and maintain relationships. The link between animal production and disease prevention and wildlife crime. And some future needs that were found are a need for enforcement, funding and capacity building, global cooperation and political will, and legal guidance and expansion or elaboration. And to me, it was very interesting because these future needs are not just reflective of the challenges in regulating wildlife trade or in operationalizing One Health, but these are reflective of larger global health governance challenges inherent within the current system as longstanding issues. And so more specifically, things such as a lack of coordination, a siloed approach, and a lack of enforceability and compliance. And to conclude, regarding the research, the next steps are a consideration of gray literature and an analysis of both the gray literature and the formally published literature. Some personal takeaway points. Lately, I've been thinking and reflecting a lot using the briefing note format. And much of my discussions with Raphael have been around how to problematize and to think of problems also in a public policy way. And so it's been very interesting and very helpful and relevant to what I'm going to start in September, International Affairs at Carleton. And so thank you very much to Raphael and Dr. Viktorovitz and everyone at the Dahdaleh Institute for your mentorship and encouragement and support. This has been very formative an experience. So thank you very much.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Ryan. It's great to see the progress you've made and all your learning. It's been wonderful. So we can now move on to our fourth presenter, who is Anna Maria Subik, who's supervised by Byung-Kesh Talukder. Anna Maria is a graduate of McMaster University with an honors Bachelor of Science degree in biology and psychology. She is currently pursuing a Master of Public Health at Lakehead University. Anna is working with research fellow Byung-Kesh Talukder, conducting a systematic literature review on the risks of urban agriculture. She hopes to find a place in global and public health where she can combine her interests in planetary health, climate change, and social justice in a way that will combat global health inequities. The title of her presentation is Systems Thinking and Planetary Health Risks, an Analysis of Urban Agriculture. So over to you, Anna Maria.
Hello, I'm just going to share my screen and we can get started. Excuse this little bit of lag here. Alrighty, hello all. Thank you for being here. Thank you for staying until the end. A big hand to my fellow presenters. You all had really nice and interesting presentations. So today I'm going to be discussing a systems thinking based planetary health risks analysis of urban agriculture, which is a bit of a mouthful, which I worked on during my time as an intern to satisfy the practicum requirements of my program at Lakehead University as a Master of Public Health candidate. This project was done under the supervision of Dr. Byung-Kesh Talukder, BK, and with a lot of help from Nilyana Ganguly, or Nell, and Janani Mahswaran. This was essentially a systematic literature review, which was done in preparation for the International Conference on Sustainable Development. The aim of this project was to conduct a risk analysis on urban agriculture, which I'll refer to as UA from now on, and to create a preliminary framework to promote a holistic approach to urban agriculture worldwide. So I'm going to briefly touch upon all the parts of the project, and then I'm going to go into a personal reflection of what I learned here during my time at the Dahdaleh Institute. So urban agriculture is an incredibly broad term which encompasses many things. It has been around for a very long time and recently started to embrace it as a sustainable solution for green urban growth and climate adaptation. These are just some of the terms that we found to be used to refer to urban agriculture. While the benefits of urban agriculture are widely discussed and perhaps anecdotally known, the risks are a bit harder to pin down. And so we conducted a systematic literature review to attempt to identify some of the risks and to identify research done on both the risks and benefits and potentially notion towards what research needs to be done. So database creation and extraction was done following Prisma guidelines, and this was most of my work on the project. We used Web of Science and PubMed to search for articles which were in English and published 2010 onwards. We used a variety of terms to search for these articles. I then exported all these articles to Zotero to screen them. So this is my Prisma diagram, basically following the screening of the articles by title, then by abstract, and then finally by paper itself. And we finally narrowed it down to 55 articles. And then we moved on to database data extraction, which occurred in Excel. We looked at location of study, affiliation of researchers, social, environmental, and economic benefits and risks, exposure pathway, as well as direct and indirect risks. So we found a lot of interesting things. We looked at more papers discussing risks than benefits, and we found that most authors were from the global north. We also found that in the benefits category, the most talked about benefits were social, while the most discussed risks were environmental. So this is just a brief overview of some of the points discussed in the articles. For benefits, lower middle income countries and disadvantaged communities had a lot of benefits, physical and mental betterment from urban agriculture, as well as fresh, nutrient-rich, locally grown produce at reduced grocery costs. And as well, we found environmental resilience and climate change adaptation could come from urban agriculture. In terms of risks, we found that bioaccumulation of metals was talked about a lot in these articles, as well as infection and disease spread, especially zoonotic disease spread from sometimes backyard farming. As well, we found that there was a lack of governance and sometimes inequitable distribution of resources in urban agriculture. So we used these articles to create a preliminary framework. This preliminary framework was primarily worked on by NAL, but I am showing it to you just because it was one of the primary objectives of the project, and this is all the research that we looked at, essentially kind of narrowed down a lot. And that was a lot of the work. Well, this was essentially the scope of the work I did. I learned a lot during my time here. Prior to this, I'd never done a systematic review, even though I learned about them. And I also learned about the process of preparing for an international conference. Finally, I learned a lot about Zotero, which is personally a big deal because I used Mendeley before, and this is much better in my opinion. In terms of some of my research learnings, I learned a lot more about urban agriculture, past just the anecdotal things I knew or past popular news articles. And I learned how, while it is beneficial, the whole situation is a bit more nuanced than just good, and that to successfully incorporate urban agriculture as a method of bettering planetary health, both sides of the spectrum need to be considered. So thank you to everyone here today. Thank you to BK, Nalanjanani, and to everyone at the Dahdaleh Institute, especially for setting up this presentation.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Anna Maria. Very fascinating work. So let me just begin with a question. Yeah, I found, Anna Maria, I found it very interesting in your presentation that urban agriculture can actually enhance zoonotic disease spread. And I was wondering if you came across regulations or standards or those kinds of things that, you know, is there, when we engage in urban agriculture, are there guidelines that guide us? Because, you know, I was recently in touch with someone in the US at the National Institutes of Health who's engages in sort of setting guidelines around preventing zoonosis disease. And she suggested, you know, having poultry in your backyard, for example, is becoming somewhat trendy. But she suggested that it could spread salmonella, for example. Now, so anyways, I just leave that with you.
Yeah, so we didn't actually, within the scope of our review, we didn't find anything on guidelines, although I know personally, like, you can't have chickens in Toronto, I think. But again, that wasn't in the research. And we found that these zoonotic diseases were spread primarily when there was, I think the article that I'm thinking of is when there was like a tropical rainforest nearby that transmitted it to the backyard poultry. It was poultry, actually. I think it was ducks in this case. Yeah, that just kind of touches upon why there needs to be a little bit more guidelines and more research into the risks, especially for that as well. I don't know if I answered your question. Unfortunately, I don't know super much because it didn't come across, but that is what we came across.
Okay, that's great. And I just, I'm trying to see if you had mentioned exactly, you mentioned going into graduate school next year, and what field you plan to pursue.
Oh, me? I'm in graduate school right now. I'm just finishing up my Master of Public Health.
All right.
Yeah.
Lakehead
University, yeah.
Lakehead, yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
well, fantastic. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
So, Raphael, you have a question.
I do. Thank you. Thank you, Ryan, Anna, and Leah. Very informative. I'm always impressed at the learning curve of each one of you, and it's so interesting to see that. I have a question for both Ryans, actually. So it's a question based on what you've seen so far, let's assume these are the findings. So based on the trends that you identified while doing your research, Ryan Gray in terms of the wildlife trade, Ryan Jivan in terms of medical education. So there is probably something that called your attention while you were doing this research. And what I want to know is what it was and whether you can relate that to the current sort of global situation, social, political. I know wildlife trade perhaps relates to now, obviously, COVID, whereas I don't know for Ryan Jivan, if he can relate to anything that is happening currently, politically or socially.
Sure. Should I start or should I let the Ryan with better facial hair start?
You go ahead. You go ahead, please.
No worries. No worries. Okay. Yeah. So thanks for the question, Raphael. For me personally, as I kind of navigated this landscape, the one thing that kind of stood out to me the most wasn't necessarily, I guess, the implementation of like new things. It's how it's pretty much I pretty much have a better understanding of why we are here today. And I understand why things now are, working and why they're not working, and why the unfortunate reality is that in terms of like the educational landscape, why it'll be very difficult in the future to continue making progress. In terms of planetary health, that was one of the things that Dr. Rabinsky was most interested in trying to implement into medical school. And the unfortunate reality is this, and as Tian has already said, we're not doing a particularly great job of it. There are some schools that kind of stand out in terms of their own involvement in it. Namely, for me personally, in my research, it had to be Dalhousie in Northern Ontario. But they're very much, they're two schools that are very reflective on having physicians that represent the community of which they serve, which I also personally agree with. I do think physicians should represent who they serve, and I guess because that immediately gives you a type of predisposition to what's actually the issues involved in the community. The only issue is that we actually have a fairly large population compared to medical schools. And what happens is that in order to get students that embody this philosophy, you exclude an dictionary and pretty much a massive amount of students. So I think finding ways to improve, introduce these measures which are supposed to be, which something that everyone should acknowledge, is going to be very difficult in terms of medical school, in terms of their own curriculums. We're finding ways that pretty much in my own analysis of medical curriculums, finding a biomedical perspective is like par for the course. And even though we kind of at times smugly think that our health system is much better than the States, the fact of the matter is our medical education system is just as pretty much identical, and at times is even worse. So for me, it's still very much an old boys club. And the reason why planetary health is not being prescribed not taught as much is, one, is because not there's a general interest in that. I read a CFM heart survey. CFM is the Canadian Federation of Medical Students. And they personally said that there's a big interest in planetary health curriculum in medical schools, but they don't have anybody, one, they have no interest in actually implementing that level, or they don't have people who are experts to teach. So they don't have BKs, they don't have Dr. Brands, they don't have yourself, lying around to teach. So that might be a really good opportunity for you guys if you want to teach. But of course, the issue is that you guys are also very unique in the fact that you guys are pioneers for this type of field. So of course you guys want to, pretty much innovate, which is probably where planetary health is. It's not something that's, I guess, been around, forever. Arguably for me, and pardon my ignorance to people who actually have PhDs in this type of, field. For me personally, in my own research, I really don't think planetary health was really made as urgent as it was till that Rockstrom 2008 paper came out, which talked about the planetary boundaries. So really, it's still it's a very important part of medicine. It bleeds into a whole bunch of things, but the reality is that for me, it's very surprising that even though medical schools love to say that they're doing things, in practice, they're really not doing that. And I think for me, the part that kind of sickened me the most was kind of really assessing medical schools in terms of the equity. For me, I think healthcare, I guess me 12 months ago would always try to kind of blend equity and equality into two things. I do think they're very different things. I think when schools try to say that they're equitable, they kind of have things on paper that say that they are, but in reality they're not. So I think the physician landscape in the Western world needs to change. And we definitely need to take, pretty much ideas from other places. I think the medical system in South Africa, South America, and the very socialistic medicine system that they have is arguably one of the most pinnacle of actual human-centric medical care, which is something for me I care about the most. As Dr. Urbinsky said, if you read Dr. Urbinsky's book, which I think everyone should if they have a chance to do it, it really helps you understand the humanness of medicine. So much so getting rid of the science aspect of it. So for me, that was actually the most interesting thing. I'm sorry if that was a super long answer, but yeah, in terms of my own research and how it kind of blends into what you study as well, Raphael, I think that while planetary health is becoming increasingly more important, the desire to actually implement it is still not there. That's for me, that's kind of alarming. So I hope that pioneers like yourself and students like ourselves can make that a change. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Right. Thank you, Ryan. And, I recall a recent CMAJ, the medical journal in Canada, article on pollution, air pollution, being one of the major causes of death and disability. And you would think that's so linked to, planetary health, that why aren't they doing something about it if it's affecting health so directly? But anyways, Ryan Gray, would you like to respond?
Thank you. Thank you, Raphael, for your question. And I may just piggyback a little off of Ryan's really great comment. For me, my interest is taking, knowing how did we get here, just into a different direction, the opposite direction, with the bigger picture. That's always been my interest with trade and investment, how few people, behind closed doors can make decisions that affect everyone. And, sometimes we know nothing about these, agreements until years after things have happened. But to tie that into real concrete things, one thing that's interesting to me is seeing how global health security is used with this topic, but not that I necessarily agree or think that this is the silver bullet, but just that, as one approach, it's interesting to see global health security, how it could be used, and also how it could maybe be dialed back in certain ways. And just also as these issues and planetary health issues need to be prioritized, which, Raphael, you've given me lots of mentorship and reading in this regard, where these are now moral obligations and moral decisions that we have to prioritize and say that yes, climate change is happening, and it's either do we do something about it or do we not. And so in the same way with biodiversity as a wildlife commons, I think the very same could be applied. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Ryan. Okay, so we have a few questions coming up. Sarah and Anna Marie, you had an exchange. I wonder if you'd like to talk about that. And then we have Taneka and Tiana.
Great, thank you very much. I thought both the answers of both the Ryans were great. There's a lot of hope for medical professionals getting involved with advocacy and representing community, which is really positive. Anna Maria, I think, has answered most of my question. I think just to answer your query, Anna Maria, I think you may want to look at what has been done in the refugee camps in northern Iraq, as well as what's been done in Jordan. The reason I asked about this concept of solutions is it's gone even beyond saying that they're socially acceptable, but actually a way to integrate displaced populations into the community, because with agriculture, it sort of opens up a discussion with authorities who don't necessarily want refugees to be there for 20, 30 years. And it becomes like a political opening. So it's a very interesting angle. And I know this is something that's really being focused on now. For all the fantastic reasons you listed out, I really like the pie chart, as well as this political dialogue. So thank you very much.
Thank you for that piece. I'm definitely going to look into that. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, both of you. So now, Tanaka, you had a question.
Thank you. I had a question, I think, probably for Ryan Gray, but maybe also for Anna Maria, just regarding the zoonotic origin of a lot of new diseases that we're seeing. I know, Ryan, you talked a lot about, or specifically about the wildlife trade, but I was wondering if you could both expand it a little bit to look at kind of urban expansion and the encroachment of human environment into typically animal environments. So we're seeing a lot more close contact and a lot more overlap, and as well as the effect of either industrial scale farming or smaller local farming, sort of what we're seeing in urban environments as well. Yeah, so if you could just give us a little bit more on that, that'd be great. Thanks.
Anna Maria, may I go first?
Yes, please
Thank
go ahead.
you.
I think this actually might be better in your ballpark than mine.
Okay. Thank you for your question. Yeah, yeah. There's a lot that there's a huge theoretical background with zoonoses and emerging infectious diseases. Much of what you said with industrial animal animal production, or the urbanization and population growth, these things, just with my presentation, I've tried to lump these into the catch-all of wildlife trade. But so, wildlife trade really does, for the review, I think it does encompass the illegal trade and poaching, and it encompasses these animal production. Oh, does it? Does that answer your question? Or do you mean to say, would you like some more information on these aspects?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I found the whole idea of it quite interesting. So yeah, if you had more information, or if you had an idea of which of these sectors were kind of driving the new infectious diseases more, or if they all do, I'm not sure.
Although we're not focusing on this, food production was something of a theme that did come up. Industrial, and with that, there's lots of animal welfare concerns. So definitely food production, and there are lots of organizations, food and agriculture organizations, the World Organization for Animal Health, the CBD. There's really quite a few. Yeah, but we are just, I believe, more the focus is more on the trade and the standards in this regard. So that maybe that's why we did not focus so much on food production and industrialization and urbanization. But those are definitely very, very important topics as well. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, okay, well, thank you, Tanaka and Ryan. I guess something I could add to this is conducting some interviews in this area. And from what we know about, for example, the Wuhan wildlife market, where it's believed COVID may have emerged from, an analysis found that almost half of the animals that were traded in that market were hunted, like they were shot, not produced agriculturally, which is, we're talking now about the supply chain. And so this was a person in the WHO who was suggesting there should be a guideline that, for example, any animals traded should not be hunted. They should be produced through agriculture and, following guidelines. I guess all of these things are coming together in a really complex way, but yeah, I think it's a really important issue. So, and Raphael, I don't know if you wanted to add something as well.
Yes, it's a great question and great answers. Just to add to that, I think because also much of the illegal trade can also be responsible for the transmission of zoonotic disease. It is sometimes difficult to actually estimate precisely what is the biggest driver, although there have been estimates, and I think we can find this in the literature, but I would personally go as far as saying, just to sort of echo some of Ryan's comments, that perhaps we should stop thinking about looking at what, this is just a consideration. So we should stop thinking about the estimates and the percentages, and we should instead just focus on it, prioritize. So planetary health is priority over, say, material interests or economic utility, and we should just make that the priority, and everything else will sort of, in a sense of path dependency, will sort of unfold from that main idea. So that's a bit contentious, but I would argue that, yeah, it's worth exploring this. So not just looking at reducing some sort of, obviously it's good to reduce illegal trade, but just to look at stop it, just to look at focusing on what's better for the environment instead.
All right, thank you, everyone. So now we can move on to Tiana. You had a question. And then Nilufer.
No, I put my hand down because it was actually in response to something that Ryan said about the curriculum, and the time has passed, but he also addressed it really well. So.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, Nilufer, you had is that a question or a comment? Would you like to?
Same as Tiana, Ryan addressed it, and I just added some points into the chat, but thank you.
Okay, wonderful, thank you. And Amrita, I'm wondering if you're still on, and I saw that you had chimed in.
Mary, I think Amrita left. I think she had
Okay, all right. Okay, fair enough. Yeah. So are there any other questions? We have a few minutes if anyone does. I think these are all such fascinating presentations. You're all covering such important areas. I think it's also kind of in this session, the juxtaposition of medical school and looking at environmental factors and, agriculture, supply chains for wildlife, wildlife trade, and how, we really need to start to take more of this One Health approach, because we're all so interconnected. All these aspects are so interconnected that, can't just practice medicine without thinking about the bigger context in which humans live and what we're doing to our planet, because it's going to come back and bite us if we don't. And that's what's happening right now. So really fascinating, and how a lot of these things are, Raphael, you have said this before, some of the major factors that are, some of the, I think you refer to them as accelerations, and how they're all, each of them in their own way is, it's like we don't just have one crisis going on, we have multitude. And I don't know if you'd like to speak to that for a moment.
Sure. So yeah, maybe this can be also interested in pursuing graduate studies or further their studies. When I first met Professor Mary Viktorovits, I did my master's in social and cultural anthropology in Belgium. And I learned about an anthropologist that talked that three major forces are actually driving humanity, which are consumption, mobility, and communication. And it is now, I suppose, with the publication of the last report, the IPCC report, it's now obvious that human activity is the biggest factor sort of driving species extinction and climate change and all that, and eventually our own demise. So how to actually translate this sort of passions that I have, this genuine personal interest, into sort of a research idea, a research problem, and then indicators and all that, and also in a way that it can perhaps become transformative, can do some, make a little dent on what we do. So this is what I've been actually working on and dedicating myself to. So this is basically perhaps a way to support you guys in thinking about what you want and what you like and try to transform that into something that makes sense to you and maybe for the rest of your life or maybe for the next 5 to 10 years.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay, well, I think we've had a great discussion. Interesting to see the linkages between the different areas, especially medical school and, you know, planetary health and disease emergence. And I think all of you have done just such great and superb research that it's going to hold you in good stead in the future, because I know all of you have exciting plans and you have exciting futures ahead of you. And we look forward to your contributions, your very significant contributions you're going to make in all of your respective areas. And you're going to be the leaders and the shapers of tomorrow. So thank you so much. And with that, I guess we can conclude. So all the best in the fall, especially as you start your new years, your new academic years. Okay, I guess we can sign off then.